The threat hung over Canada for nearly a decade, a persistent economic storm cloud on the southern horizon. The warnings were explicit, delivered in the blunt idiom of rallies and social media posts. Tariffs, border taxes, the dismantling of trade agreements that had governed commerce for a generation. The target was precise: the heart of Canadian manufacturing, the auto industry, a sector supporting hundreds of thousands of families. The objective was clear: to weaken, to pressure, to force capitulation. The architect of this sustained campaign was Donald Trump. His method was chaos, his weapon uncertainty. He understood that capital is cowardly, that investment flees instability. For years, he manufactured that instability, aiming it squarely at Ontario's industrial belt. The goal was not just to win concessions, but to fundamentally reorient the continental economy, making the United States the undisputed, unavoidable center of gravity. Today, that campaign met its most sophisticated and devastating response. Mark Carney, the former central banker turned political architect, did not just answer Trump's threats. He rendered them obsolete. In a meticulously orchestrated move, Carney unveiled a national auto strategy so comprehensive, so forward-looking, and so strategically sound that it has effectively checkmated a decade of economic hostility. This is not a story of a simple rebuttal. It is a story of strategic jiu-jitsu, where the force of an opponent's aggression is used against them. Carney's plan does not erect walls, it builds magnets. It does not retaliate with tariffs first, it preempts them with irresistible incentives. The core of the strategy is a fundamental rethinking of economic sovereignty. For too long, Canadian auto policy was reactive, a series of desperate measures to retain plants threatened with closure. Carney has shifted the paradigm from defense to offense. The new strategy makes Canada the most attractive, stable, and profitable place to build the vehicles of the future in North America. It is a direct assault on Trump's core premise that America can win through bullying alone. The announcement today in a retooled Windsor assembly plant was a masterclass in economic statecraft. The air was thick not with political rhetoric, but with the palpable relief and ambition of union leaders, auto executives, and municipal officials. They were not witnessing another temporary subsidy. They were seeing the blueprint for a permanent industrial renaissance. Carney stood flanked by workers, his delivery calm, his language precise, each word a calculated component of a larger design. He spoke of structural resilience, of sovereign capability, and generational investment. This was the language of nation building, not political campaigning. The financial commitments are staggering in scale, but surgical in application. A $2.3 billion electric vehicle affordability program is its consumer-facing spearhead. But the devil, as always, is in the details that followed. The rebate, up to $5,000 for a battery electric vehicle, comes with a critical game-changing condition. The $50,000 price cap is waived entirely for vehicles assembled in Canada. Furthermore, the incentive applies only to vehicles from countries with which Canada has a free trade agreement. This is policy with multiple layers of strategic intent. On the surface, it stimulates demand for Canadian-made cars, providing a direct sales advantage to domestic plants. But the deeper, more profound impact is on global automakers who have thus far avoided building in Canada. For giants like Hyundai, Kia, Honda, and Toyota, which manufacture best-selling models in the United States, Mexico, and overseas, this creates an immediate market distortion. Their cars, imported into Canada, now face a consumer price disadvantage of thousands of dollars compared to a physically identical model built in Ontario. The message is unambiguous. If you want competitive access to the Canadian market, you must manufacture here. This single rule transforms Canada from a passive market into an active shaper of global supply chains. It turns consumer policy into industrial policy. It uses the purchasing power of Canadian families as leverage to secure billions in foreign direct investment. Analysts are already calling it the domestic content requirement achieved through the back door of consumer incentives, a maneuver that likely skirts the strict letter of trade agreements while wholly embracing their competitive spirit. This is where Carney's central banking experience is evident. He understands leverage, triggers, and behavioral economics. He has designed a system where market forces are aligned with national interest. The strategy extends far beyond the showroom floor. A massive $5 billion strategic innovation fund envelope is now exclusively dedicated to automotive and battery supply chain projects. This fund operates not as a grant, but as a co-investment vehicle. It de-risks private capital, inviting corporations to partner with the federal government on a scale that matches the existential bets being made in the industry's electric transition. The fund's managers are empowered to move with venture capital speed, a deliberate attempt to circumvent the bureaucratic lethargy that has often doomed Canadian industrial policy. Crucially, the investments are structured as recoverable loans or equity stakes, meaning the public shares in the upside, creating a potential future revenue stream to fund further innovation. This is a self-reinforcing financial engine. But the true stroke of geopolitical genius lies in the strategy's integrated defense mechanism. Carney has publicly and formally linked Canada's continued participation in the USMCA trade agreement to the maintenance of auto-specific Chapter 31 tariffs. The document states clearly and for the first time that a U.S. withdrawal from the pact would automatically trigger the reimposition of a 25% tariff on American automotive exports to Canada. This is not a new threat, but its explicit integration into a forward-looking industrial strategy changes its character entirely. It is no longer a retaliatory measure. It is a published, pre-announced contingency, a built-in stability mechanism. It tells Washington that the cost of tearing up the agreement is now mathematically quantified and instantly applicable. It removes the element of bluff. For the U.S. auto industry, this creates a terrifying predictability. They now operate with the certain knowledge that instability begets immediate severe financial pain. This moves the political risk from Ottawa to Washington. It forces the Big Three and their political allies to become the most vocal defenders of the USMCA's survival, acting as a powerful internal lobby against any protectionist whims from the White House. Carney has effectively conscripted the Detroit-based auto executives as unwitting guardians of Canadian industrial stability. The intelligence community has long warned of the national security risks of concentrated offshore supply chains. Carney's strategy internalizes this analysis. By incentivizing a closed-loop, Canadian-based supply chain for critical minerals, battery component manufacturing, and final vehicle assembly, Canada is building economic redundancy. This is not about autarky. It is about resilience. In an era of pandemics, blockades, and great power rivalry, a sovereign capability to produce essential manufactured goods is a strategic asset. The strategy explicitly funds the entire value chain, from mine to highway. This includes targeted support for junior mining companies developing cobalt, lithium, and nickel deposits in Northern Ontario and Quebec, ensuring these resources feed Canadian factories, not just global markets. The operational security around the development of this plan was notable. While Trump's modus operandi is public, performative negotiation, Carney's was one of silent, diligent preparation. Over 18 months, teams from finance, innovation, and global affairs worked in strict confidence with provincial counterparts, union pension fund managers, and select automotive CFOs. The negotiations were not about politics. They were about engineering, logistics, and return on investment. This clandestine development phase allowed the government to enter into advanced, concrete discussions with potential new entrants, like a Korean battery giant or a European luxury EV manufacturer, before a single headline was generated. The unveiling was not a starting gun. It was the public reveal of a race already in motion. The political calculus behind this is profound. Carney has united traditionally fractious constituencies. The union movement sees guaranteed high-quality jobs and a seat at the strategy table. The private sector sees unprecedented capital commitment and regulatory certainty. Provincial premiers, irrespective of party, see massive inbound investment for their communities. This domestic unity is itself a deterrent to foreign pressure. A divided Canada is easy to threaten. A Canada speaking with one determined voice is a formidable counterpart. The historical context cannot be ignored. The 1965 Auto Pact was a bilateral managed trade agreement that created the modern integrated industry. It was a brilliant deal for its time, but it made Canada a dependent branch plant. The USMCA modernized rules but left Canada vulnerable to political whims. Carney's strategy seeks to transcend this legacy. It uses the framework of trade agreements not as a ceiling, but as a floor. It aims to build a Canadian auto industry that is a technological leader, not just an assembler, and a net exporter of innovation, not just vehicles. The international reaction is beginning to crystallize. In Washington, trade officials were reportedly caught off guard by the plan's comprehensiveness. The typical response to Trumpian pressure has been pleading or piecemeal protection. Carney offered neither. He presented a superior product. Diplomatic cables are likely buzzing with analysis as allies in Europe and Asia see a template for resisting economic coercion. Adversaries see a demonstration of how a middle power can assert sovereignty through smart, rules-based policy. The strategy also contains a subtle but potent cultural component. The repeated phrase, "We are an auto nation," is not empty patriotism. It is a narrative-building exercise aimed at the Canadian public and the world. It reinforces identity, fosters pride in manufacturing, and builds a social license for the massive public investments. This cultural shield is as important as the financial one, making future retrenchment politically toxic. Economists are now modeling second-order effects. The demand for skilled trades will explode, necessitating a parallel national strategy for education and immigration. The increased electricity demand from new mega plants will accelerate investments in green grid infrastructure. The rise of a domestic battery ecosystem will spawn secondary industries in recycling and storage solutions. Carney has not launched a policy. He has triggered an industrial cascade. The question of how this was funded without apocalyptic deficits leads to another revealing detail. The government's fiscal framework now treats these automotive investments as nation-building infrastructure, akin to railways or highways, with amortization schedules stretching decades. Furthermore, a portion of the capital is being drawn from the publicly managed Canada Growth Fund, which itself leverages private institutional capital. This is a long-term, patient capital approach, divorced from the short-term electoral cycle. It signals to markets that this commitment will survive changes in government. The contrast in leadership style is the ultimate revelation. Trump's power stems from the theatrical, from the art of the unpredictable deal, from keeping allies and adversaries perpetually off balance. His is a strategy of entropy. Carney's power stems from the opposite: meticulous design, predictable rules, and the cultivation of deep, stable trust with capital and labor. His is a strategy of order. In the contest for the future of North American manufacturing, order has just presented a compelling and perhaps unbeatable value proposition. The workers on the line in Oakville, Ingersoll, and Brampton now have more than hope. They have a documented, funded pathway. Their jobs are no longer bargaining chips in a continental poker game. They are integral components of a sovereign industrial base. This psychological shift from vulnerability to confidence may be the strategy's most immediate and powerful effect. As the sun sets on the announcement day, the strategic picture becomes clear. Donald Trump spent years trying to weaken Canada's auto industry through external pressure. Mark Carney has strengthened it by making its foundation internal, resilient, and dynamic. The tariffs and threats were meant to provoke fear and retreat. The response was a blueprint for confidence and expansion. The playbook of economic coercion has met its match in the playbook of intelligent, inclusive, and strategic investment. Canada is no longer merely defending its turf. It is defining the new terrain upon which the battle for North American industrial supremacy will be fought. And in that redefinition lies a quiet, formidable power. The world is watching. Other nations subject to similar pressures are taking notes. The era of shouting may not be over, but today demonstrated that the future belongs to those who build.